Welcome to another edition of Big in Biz with DiViz. I'm Craig DiVizzio, and today my guest is Marcella Cox. She is a physician and was, when I was teaching college, the best student that I ever had. On the show today, she talked about how to have a better relationship with your doctor. What are some of the small things you can do to get better health care, to get the doctor to pay attention to you, to get them to really engage in your care program. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. Welcome to another edition of Big in Biz with DiViz. I'm Craig DiVizzio, president of DiVizzio International, and my guest today is Marcella Cox. Most of you know that I taught college for 13 years before I started teaching in business. Out of all the students that I taught, Marcella was by far the best student that I taught. I don't think she got anything less than maybe a 99 on any one test. She made my classes look way too easy, and it's a pleasure to have her here today. Because of that, my thinking was, I lost touch with her for a little while, thinking was she could do with her life anything that she wanted. So it's not surprising to me that when we reconnected, I found out that she is now a physician. Let me tell you a little bit more about Marcella Cox. She's the Health Center Medical Director for Premise Health, and they're working with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, expanding the clinics to include primary care. She got her bachelor's in biology from Georgia State. She went to medical school in Phoenix, and then was a physician first in the Air Force for 5 years, stationed in San Francisco, Guam, and is that Minot,
North Dakota.
Minot, North Dakota. She was a primary care physician in Tucson, Arizona for 4 years, and also spent 1 year as the associate medical director. In 2017, she moved back home to Atlanta to be closer to her family and talk about her family a little bit. She was born in Santiago, Chile. Her mother is Chilean. Her dad is Tennessean. He's from Tennessee. Her dad was a quadriplegic, and her mom was his only caregiver. He had a very successful career as a lobbyist in the disability rights movement. He unfortunately passed away in 2019, but he was Marcella's hero. She's the proud mother of 3 beautiful girls, 13, and twins who are 10. She loves to read, do yoga, and ballroom dance. Marcella, it is a pleasure to see you again and welcome you to the show.
Thanks, Craig. It is such a pleasure to be here. And as you know, and as always, I am living the dream, and I see you are doing the same. So happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you. Glad to have you. I mentioned in the intro that you could have done anything that you wanted to do with your life. Why medicine? Why still medicine? Because oftentimes people get into something and then they change their careers. You've stuck with that. Talk a little bit about that.
I actually had a lot of changes. I started off with the intention of actually being a psychologist. And then when the changes in what you needed, the credentials to be a psychologist started changing, I thought, well, if I'm going to get a doctorate, I may as well become a doctor. So I redirected. I actually had several points of inspiration. You were one. You told me after a test one time, and I'll never forget it, you said, I don't know what you're going to do, but whatever you do, please have it involve psychology, because clearly that's a natural place for you. Okay. So that was a big push. And then the second was a doctor that I worked with who, at that time, I was actually studying to be a massage therapist, and he said, no. He said, you need to go into medicine. You have something special, and you have the abilities, so follow that dream. And so between the two of you, I got the little bumps I needed, and so I went forward with it. Everybody knows your life inspires what you end up doing. Of course, my dad being a quadriplegic, working for disability access and rights, seeing all of the challenges that people have with getting the proper medical care. All those things inspired me to try to be part of the process, hopefully make things better for people as I went along. So that's what got me there.
You mentioned that the gentleman said, hey, there's something special about you. You need to be in medicine. Can we ask what that was? Where he was leading you in that direction? because of what?
So I was working as the front desk receptionist in that office, and I managed all of the patients as they came in. And as you know, people come in late sometimes, and we have to kind of manage the schedule. But also, we have a lot of people that are very upset, very distraught about whatever their health concerns may be. And he heard from several of the patients that brief conversations with me about how I would reassure them that the doctor was going to spend the time and that we were going to help them, and however long that took, that those conversations really seemed to help them and give them a lot of confidence and a little bit of calm before they went in to see the doctors. And they said that's unique, to be able to really look at somebody, meet them where they are, and offer some words of support without judgment. And obviously we worked really hard to make sure they knew we weren't in a hurry, and it was all about taking care of them.
Well, interesting, because it sounds like you combined my suggestion and his suggestion. I was saying go to psychology, and basically he's saying that's what you're doing, that whether you're next to a bed or not, what is quoted as a bedside manner and being able to explain things was something that was a gift of yours in that sense, correct?
Yep, and I feel so incredibly blessed to be able to do that. I really feel like when I talk to people and when they're telling me their story, I don't just hear the words that they're saying. I almost feel like I can see the story behind it. And so I can be keeping a mental note of what they are telling me they're worried about, and then my little subset of notes of the things that I see that I plan to address that they're not even talking about, but I'm fairly certain are also issues, contributors, or maybe even the primary issue.
What are some of the things that people, and this may be a harder question to answer than I'm hoping it is. What are some of the things that people come in worrying about? Is there, if you were to categorize those, there's a ton of people who come in and this is their number one concern with doctors, with medicine, with healthcare in general, or is it across the spectrum, everybody's got something a little bit different?
Yes, to both. So when they come in, typically there's going to be two primary concerns, I think. One is the medical condition that brought them in, if there is one. And then the second is that they're not going to get the help they need. I mean, there's always that worry of, am I going to be able to talk to this doctor, and are they going to understand, and are they going to be able to help me? So given both of those, again, my goal is always to try to come alongside the patient. What I do is I try to say, okay, tell me about what you know about this situation you're worried about. And then they'll talk for a little while, and I'll listen, and then I'll say, okay, I have some suggestions of things that I'm thinking about, and let's talk about, what you think about that. And then if there's education opportunities, as you imagine there always are, I'll offer to give them information. And I'm very careful about this. I offer it. I don't just give it. It's really important to me that my patients say, yes, what can you tell me? They're more receptive that way. And I have an inclination that they're going to be more likely to hear me and to understand it if they have literally asked me for that bit of information. And we'll go through it. I spend all the time.
Yeah, as I reflect back on my experience with doctors, it appears to me, and it may just be my situation, that it could be finances and the need for them to book 10 times more appointments in a day than they are capable of having and doing what you're suggesting. Or maybe some other situation, but I would dare say if I interviewed a lot of people about their relationship with their doctor, what you just described would not be what they said. They would say, my doctor comes in, has an iPad or some type of a technology in front of them. They barely look up at me. They are asking me questions. I almost want to, sometimes almost want to go over there and hit them in the head and go, hey, I'm over here. Would you take a look at me? Because you're asking questions and not really, you're getting my verbal answer, but you're not paying attention to my facial expression, my body language, all the things that you and I both know communicate as much to somebody as what their verbiage is. So would you make that shift? Was that just something that you said, by gosh, I'm going to do it differently? or was there some training in your schooling where they really made an emphasis on that? Because it doesn't seem like there is, because so many people report what I've just reported.
Well, first, I'm an osteopath, and so by nature of my profession, we are fully certified, board certified doctors. We do everything from neurosurgery to family practice. But we do have a little bit more emphasis on whole body and on approaching a patient as an entire, constellation of characteristics and a whole person. So I did have a little bit more emphasis on that in my training, for sure.
Okay.
I have worked in places where the expectation was that I was going to be a patient mill and I would see 25 to 30 patients a day. And so what I did when I found myself in those situations is I worked really hard to streamline the documentation and the things that are not personal, heartfelt patient interaction things, to streamline them. So, for example, I do my own typing while I'm seeing the patient, but my eyes are on the patient, and I've actually gotten really good at being my own scribe, so I can do that. So I don't waste a lot of time on the paperwork and the less important, in my mind, things, and I spend a lot more time with the patients. Second of all, I had to look for a job that would accommodate my approach, because I teach, I have the pleasure of teaching medical students, and I've taught residents, and I always tell them, I'm like, look, you're really caught between either needing to provide quantity or quality, and there just isn't a way to provide the quantity that some places want and provide quality. So my preference, of course, as you can tell, is quality, and I found a job that allows me to do that. The emphasis where I work now is to spend the time, and I love that. When I interviewed with them, I said, this is the place for me for sure, because of that specific point, because you're right, there's a lot of places where doctors are caught, and I'm going to tell you right now, not a one of them likes it. They all would like to be practicing medicine like I am.
Well, I am sure that your patients are appreciative of the fact that you're spending time with them and that you're not that. Let's talk to those people whose doctor is not like that. So let's create a scenario now where you are my doctor and you are not in the habit of looking up at me, asking me questions. You're just in the, and I learned a new term today, patient mill. Okay, so you're running a patient mill, and I happen to be one of your patients. And I'm listening to this podcast and going like, well, Craig, ask her, what the heck am I supposed to do with my doctor? Is there something I can say to them? Is there something I can ask them to snap them out of that? Because I'd like them to give me a little bit more of the care that Marcella is giving her patients. What would you suggest to people to say? Is there a question? Should I hit and bang on the table? What should I do to because I've done different. I want to find out if your answer, excuse me, matches up with what I've been doing, because there are certain things I do.
So that's a really, really hard question, just because it varies so much. And the things that I've seen with working with other doctors and watching that process, I think that as a patient, I know, I can tell you, I've been in that situation. And honestly, I have said to the provider, hey, did you catch that last thing I said? Just kind of to check in, like, hey, I'm letting you know I don't feel like I'm being listened to. I will tell you that there are a lot of doctors out there, and that when you don't have any major things going on and you're coming in for a general checkup, we do cut corners in time getting that visit done so that we can apply more time to somebody who may walk in and have much more need. But if you are not happy with your provider, that will impact how successful the medical treatments are going to be. I would strongly urge, go out, interview different doctors. I can't tell you how many times I've been interviewed by prospective patients.
Really?
Yeah, they come in and they just make an appointment, a meet and greet is what we call it. I think people don't do it enough. I think that it is essential. We're talking about a very personal, very intimate relationship. We're talking about trust that needs to be in place in order for the process to be effective. So critical. I would encourage everybody, if you're not happy with your provider and you can't just say, hey, I'm not sure you're seeing me, and they respond, maybe it's time to change providers.
Yeah, that's great advice. Great advice. I know that what I have done, obviously being in teaching communication, is that I will start talking to the doctor and then I'll do just that. I will pause. I'll pause for a while, and they'll look up like, what just happened there? And it's almost, I don't say this to embarrass them. Thank you very much for acknowledging with your eyes that I'm still here. Or I'll say something and then I'll ask them a question on the back end of that, so that they have to answer it, to get a little more back and forth that where they're going to be engaging with me. Well, we pushed a little bit on the doctors and maybe called them out if they're not providing that kind of care. Let's talk about the patients. And I know that you get probably an endless list of it. I'm going to call them excuses. Patients may call them reasons for why they avoid going to the doctor. They don't follow they come to you and you say, okay, here's my prescription. Not necessarily write a prescription, but this is what I'd like you to do. Next time, did you do what I suggested? No, I didn't do that. Let's talk. What are some of the ones that are most common? How do you handle that? Or go wherever you want to with that question.
So the most common challenges, I think, is where you're going with this as far as with patients and the application of the suggestions that we make, I think stem from some deep-seated issues. Number one, I know that people don't realize how much control they have over certain situations, certain conditions. So, example, diabetes. I hear very often, I'll do the test and I'll tell them, well, you're not diabetic, you're not even pre-diabetic, and that's great. Let's talk about maintaining that. And they look at me and say, well, I know I'm gonna be because it's in my family. So then I have to explain to them, no, you have a predisposition. And I do a lot of storytelling. So a little brief one that I have is,
Sure.
I'll say, look, if you and I were to be locked in a room and they didn't give us anything but chocolate cake, we would both become diabetic. You would go first because your pancreas is predisposed to breaking down, whereas mine is not. That's the difference between being genetic and not as far as diabetes. So what it means is you don't have to become diabetic. Let's prevent it. So I try to offer a lot of sense of, how they can control these situations so they don't ever become a thing. The second roadblock that I run into is that they just don't trust the system. And that goes back a little bit to what we were just talking about. And then also, of course, getting appointments and being able to be seen. They get very frustrated if things don't happen quickly, which I agree with, because when we're motivated and ready to move, hopefully the resources will be available. And then finally, to be honest with you, I think the biggest roadblock that we run into in medicine is that personal care, it isn't prioritized. One of my favorite books is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I know you're so familiar with.
Absolutely.
And, they do that little grid. But the bottom line is that healthcare and sleep seem to fall into the important, not urgent category. And so people don't address it. I tell people a lot, your body compensates beautifully. So when they come into me and they say, everything just fell apart. I was doing fine, and all of a sudden I've got all these things. I say, no, everything didn't just fall apart. What happened is your body was compensating fantastic for years. This has been a slow progression to where it lost the ability to compensate. But we can fix it. We can change it. So we make the changes from that point. But those are some of the misconceptions. It's like it all fell apart all at once.
I'm hearing this, and I'm hearing a strong educational component to what you're doing as you're treating them. There's one thing to come in and say, and I know you would not do this, but people can picture a doctor being the all-knowing, here's my symptoms, okay, I figured it all out, now here's what you need to do. And in doing that, they really don't understand. So there's got to be an understanding of what's going on to create buy-in for the prescription of whatever the action is, whatever they need to do, start doing, stop doing, that type thing. I taught a workshop titled 7 Keys to Retiring Happy. And from that workshop, people who went through it were 55 to 65 years old, and they would always say, Craig, there's 2 topics that you cover in this retirement workshop that I wish I had had when I was 35, 40 years old. And the 2 of them, because it's almost like there's a no turning back. You have created a situation that you can't completely reverse. And that is finances. If you haven't saved money throughout your whole life, by the time you retire, it's too late now. And another category is health. And I would always say to people, if you have mistreated your body for 40, 50, 60 years, don't expect that you can completely turn the situation around. That's not to suggest that they can't make improvements and shift some things, but you can't completely do it. And so it was very interesting to me because on an intellectual level, people got it. They saw that topic and they said, man, I should have started paying attention to this more. What do we need to do differently? What is the message that needs to happen where more people are where they move it out of the box that you put it in, and they put it in, this is an urgent and important box. And because I see so many people later on in life. I just went to another reunion in my high school, and I see people and I'm going like, that is nothing but you not paying attention to certain things for an extended period of time. What do we need to do differently? What's the messaging that the medical field needs to have, or just your ideas on that topic?
First of all, I think that we in the medical field need to take a lot more time to educate healthy people, and talk about how to maintain that, because I think we overlook them a lot. When we have the privilege of having them come in the office, which is rare, when they do, to reinforce that and to support that, because the prevention piece is key. And when I get people to come in, even, we'll call it middle of the road, it's not too far gone, but they're starting to see some changes, I do a lot on the prevention. And we need to make it something that's absorbable, something that they can actually take in and kind of spin around in their head. So when I talk to patients about different things, I always preface with, hey, just so we're clear up front, I'm not walking in those shoes, and I know that. So my goal here is to give you advice to help you walk those shoes in your best life. So is that okay? And then if they accept that, then I start to give them some suggestions. But I try to do it in ways that I think will be memorable. I try to tell stories and I try to make them funny because I know that that's likely to stick a little bit, longer. And I come alongside. And then the final option I always give, and I think this might matter a lot, I tell them, or you can do nothing, because this, again, is your life. I want them to feel like I'm not trying to tell them and talk down to them. I am just offering an option, some choices, and good ones. And I always tell them, hey, whatever you do, I'm here to support, and we'll keep plugging along. So we need to talk more. Like, we as physicians need to talk more with our patients in a way they can hear us.
Yeah, you mentioned the word prevention. Let's talk a little bit more about that. I've noticed recently that of course, when you go in and they say, okay, what medications are you taking and what issue are you struggling with and what's your lifestyle like and that type of thing, I clearly communicate that my health has always been extremely important to me. I eat healthy. I've got a gym in my basement. I exercise every day. I mean, to me, this is something critical, and it kind of surprises me that so many people just ignore this for so long until it becomes a problem. But as I talk to doctors, and always have, more about the things that I'm doing to prevent issues from arising, there used to be almost like a blank stare, like I wasn't really trained to deal with the prevention side. I went to my cardiologist the other day and he said, you're in such great shape. He says, you're going to put me out of business. So I'm also wondering if there's not somewhere in there kind of a counterintuitive issue going on with doctors. It's like if we talk about prevention too much, nobody will need us, which I guarantee that will never happen. But I've noticed some of those doctors really being able to have conversations around prevention more now than they did 5, 10, 15 years ago. Is there an emphasis on that? What do you see in terms of that shift?
There's a tremendous emphasis on it now because we know that what we've been doing historically is putting out fires, and we spend a lot of time on that. And because of the shift over time between like paper charts and then going to these electronic medical records, and doctors, especially the seasoned, experienced doctors, a lot of them really struggled with that shift because of just not being computer savvy, and it actually impacted their abilities to provide that same level of care. So we've had a lot of administrative things that have shifted. So the conversation gets stunted because of time constraints. I would encourage doctors who are seeing somebody who is doing really well to start instead of catching up 10 minutes by making that visit short because they're already doing all the right stuff, that's a good 10 minutes to say, hey, let's talk about what's coming up, and let's talk about what we can do to evaluate and prevent, XYZ condition in the future. And tell me a little bit about what you're doing that works so well, because I want to share it with somebody else. So that I think is an opportunity, a window that maybe we're not using as much as we could. And from the patient side, kind of the same. I have a responsibility to share with them, like, hey, you're doing great on this, this, and this. Would you like some more ideas? I can give them to you, or I plan on seeing you back in a year because it's time for this particular prevention test, because we can catch these things early and keep you from getting really sick.
Yeah, you talked about the patient responsibility in this. What's another thing that you would say, in general, kind of across the board, not everybody obviously, but in general, most patients, if they did this or did this differently, it would make my job a lot easier. If we, you're saying to a patient, let me help you, okay, in a myriad of ways. Now let's reverse that and say, patient, let me help you do what you are trying to do with me and my health. What other than obviously following the directions that I give you to walk out of the office? Is it something in their approach, or just what comes to mind?
I think that it would be fantastic if, when I see patients, if they joined me in leaving at the door any past experience, and let's get to know each other new almost every time, really. And let's talk about what we have in this moment and focus, because I do think that both parties are guilty of spinning around in their mind of what they want to accomplish, and sometimes we might miss that mutual opportunity, that mutual goal. So to be able to come in open and looking to learn, looking to receive that guidance.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me, Marcella, because how many times people go to the doctor, number one, they don't want to go in the first place, and then how can I make this appointment as short as possible and get back to the rest of my life? Just let me tell you what I got, assess me, give me whatever I got to go, and I'm out the door, as opposed to let me establish a really good relationship with my doctor that is going to probably provide me with information that I don't even know about and how it's going to be able to help me.
Exactly.
We're running out of time. Any last thoughts, any last tips for whomever, for patients, for doctors, your last shout out that you really like people to hear?
For everybody, I hope that everybody's always looking for that way to live their best life and use the resources you have available to make that a possibility.
I am absolutely certain that your patients are glad that they have you as their physician.
Thanks.
Based on what you said. And that's not surprising to me, because you know that I believe in you and have for an awful long time. So congratulations on your career, and I really appreciate the fact that you stopped in today and shared your thoughts with us.
Thanks so much, Craig. It was so much fun.
All right. That's it for another edition of Big in Biz with DiViz. I'm Craig DiVizzio. I want to thank you for watching. Till next time, stay cool, have good thoughts. See you.